We could agree that we wanted the company to grow, but we didn't have any alignment on how the company should grow, if that made sense. And I think this was my first experience as an entrepreneur. And one of the things I'm super passionate about is the fundamental difference between agreements and alignment. And sometimes I say agreement is the death of alignment from that standpoint, because you think
Tell me more. What do you mean?
Right?
What do you mean by that agreement versus alignment? I don't understand that.
Yeah. So a couple things, and this is a random one-off, so bear with me for a second. And this is even more relevant to my current situation. What I've realized, and maybe specifically service businesses, because they're so driven by people, is that agreement typically ends up having one person feel like they're having to be less correct or less right than the other person. And at the same time, what ends up happening is you think you have agreement on like a daily basis. But when you add up all of these little yeses and nos and fines and okays, what you actually realize is that you don't have alignment on the bigger picture. Because somehow in agreement, it becomes personal, me versus you. John, you need to agree that the number should be this versus that. Versus us getting to alignment on, can we align to where the business should perform? And I know those are really nuanced things, but in businesses that are so people driven, I've really learned that I fought for agreement for a ton of my career. Like, well, you got to agree that this is what we need to do, and I'd be passionate about it. And I was actually creating distance between you and I every time I said, hey, like, I need you to agree, or you need to agree, or we need to agree, because it kept it super personal. And in businesses that are so people driven, they actually fracture relationships versus trying to really focus on, let's find alignment on where we're going. And you or I don't have to feel like we're giving a piece of that agreement up in the process.
Really smart. So when you thought about alignment, about you had this vision, you agreed that you should grow. So you didn't want it to be a lifestyle business. You wanted to grow.
Correct.
You were at 5 going, did you have a sense of what the North Star was? Like, how big did you want to get? Or like, what was the
probably like most businesses, you think doubling is the big goal, right? And so, 10 was the yardstick. And I think we had a somewhat clear path that we could probably get it to 20 or 25. And in our business, there's a revenue side, and then there's sort of a fee side or a net side. And so the goal was always to get the net side between 10 and 15 and not really worry about the top revenue side because of some pass-through costs in that. And so, Ryan and I ended up parting ways, a few years later, in what I would say is a very, we had very different views, but in a very diplomatic, rational way, because he, unlike I did in my first experience, did put the company and the people first because he believed in the people. And so he found a way that it was very, fluid for us to find a way to transition the business from that standpoint. And at that point, we had a very strong management team that was filling in the gaps, and the business was growing. And so it was super successful from that standpoint. And that one we valued higher. We valued that one, and I think at around 5x. And we worked really hard to find tax efficiency around that number. And at that point, as an agency or a service, let's talk an agency, but a service business that was primarily Canadian focused, primarily Ontario based people. Like, we didn't have 3 or 4 offices, and we didn't have multi-international clients. About maybe 25% of our business was international. That was a pretty good multiple at that time. To go into the marketplace, and we didn't really go in the marketplace, but to actually pay out. And so we felt very good on both sides of the fence that we valued the business fairly because we put the people first on that side.
And did you use the cash from the business, the operating cash, to pay him out, or did you have to like reach into your pocket and borrow money? Like, how did you actually finance it?
It ended up being a little bit of both. Right. It ended up being a little bit of, I had to pull it from a personal holding company over because we just couldn't sustain the cash on that standpoint. And then for some tax efficiency standpoint, he agreed to take some delayed payments. So it was pretty good mutual, I guess a pure seller vendor standpoint. Mm-hmm. It was a really rational deal on everyone sort of picked their list of things that were super important to them. For him, it was some tax viability. And for us, it was cash flow viability. And in the middle part of the sort of agreement was we wanted the company to be successful longer term.
Makes sense. And so you end up being the sole shareholder to Traffic, or do you have other investors at the time? Or like,
Yeah, no. At that point, I was a sole shareholder. Once we'd done that transition, our CFO, COO at the time, Kelly, actually had was on the path to become a partner through the whole process with us. And so once Ryan exited, it had availed some opportunity for Kelly to once again. She sort of had an earned equity model because she'd been there for a while. So Kelly actually ended up owning a percent of the company down the road as well.